a muscadine vine, and it's very similar to other ones of the vitex, like the grape family. Yeah, so muscadine. I believe it was actually... Okay, this is a smilax, or one of the sarsaparilla family. Often what we'd call sarsaparilla. One of the forms that was used in some of the root beer recipes was Jamaican sarsaparilla. Underneath the ground there is a root that looks reminiscent of ginger or galangal, which is used in Thai and Vietnamese cooking. And it looks like a tight sort of muscly sort of root. And it's packed full of steroidal saponins, and has sometimes been used for male bodybuilding supplements because of the sterols, which are plant steroid-like substances. And it has many other qualities, but it hasn't been researched too much by the Western pharmaceutical industry too much. Now, some people are really... have a strong dislike, a strong dislike of the invasives, but I think part of they all have a purpose, and I think this doesn't have a lot of uses for many plants and animals or humans at all, maybe apart from just as cover for birds. And I think that's generally what it is when we cut down or when parts of the forest get cleared, it helps protect the soil. It's not my favourite plant. It's called Ligustrum sinensis. It's a Chinese native poison ivy, which, looking up in the leaves, this is poison ivy. And the other one that sometimes has a hairy vine is Virginia creeper. And Virginia creeper has the 5 leaves, and a lot of people mistake it for poison ivy. And generally, Virginia creeper doesn't cause allergic reactions in most people. In some, I believe it does. One of the favourite plants of Reggie the deer is the leaves of this vine right here, which is poison ivy. And see the leaves of 3 up there, and that's one of his favourite foods. It's a member of the cashew family. And the cashew actually has very similar oils in the plant to the poison ivy. Right now I believe there's a type of fungal infection that's affecting many of the native snakes. I just read an article recently, and I can't help but think that this is related to the many fungicide products that we use in our general lives that are widely used in agriculture and also by heavy industry. And these are basically training fungi to be more virulent and to be more aggressive, and unfortunately it's taking its toll on snakes, and we've already had fungal problems with many of our amphibians as well, which has led to their numbers being decimated. Now, not a lot of people know this, but it's actually, I'm going to scrape the bark of this. I wouldn't usually, want to damage a plant, but this plant is very invasive, and I don't think it's going to hurt it too much. Now, if you scrape if I peel a bit of the inner bark off, you're going to see that it's yellow in colour, and that's due to berberine, which is an alkaloid that's found in the barberry family. This is a member of the barberry family, which includes Oregon grape, and this is a very important antiviral compound, and I believe it also hydrasticine as well is another alkaloid that's found in here. They're both powerful antimicrobials and antifungals as well. So now this plant hasn't been used very much medicinally, only in Asia a little bit from where it's from, and it has a number of other alkaloids in it which I wouldn't want to experiment with it personally, but it's certainly worth further investigation. Together, the paper pecans, they're very easy to open, and you crush them together in your hand and they just crack open, and you just pull out the nut meat, and it's all so easy. But with these ones, they're really hard, so if I could find another one, I don't even know if I could do that. Let me see if there's another one. Yeah, there's some children who've developed an aversion to being out in nature, just not being familiar, or maybe sort of replicating sort of you know, a little bit of a fear or wariness that they've got from their family members. But one of the programs that we run at Walter B. Jacobs, I think was started by Stacey Gray, was is making fairy houses. And what we do often is we procure sort of natural materials, and it's great fun if the kids can actually collect them themselves, like things like bark like this, where it comes off in sheets. You can see the mycelia there, which is actually the sort of fungal organisms which are breaking this down. And this can make, you know, a great roof for a fairy house, and you can use leaves and the cups from acorns and things like that to make these beautiful little fairy houses. And it's a great way to get kids to familiarize themselves with all these different materials on the forest floor. Or the Latin name is Ampelopsis, I believe.
Now show us the poison ivy, please, and then the...
Yeah, this is poison ivy, so it's got... The leaves are slightly reminiscent in shape, except this doesn't really have leaves of 3 as such. Well, some of them, well, on this top bit does. It's like a looky-likey. It has dark berries, which some people say are edible, but I believe hackberry, or it might be a sugarberry, which are very closely related. Forgotten the Latin name. It has these kind of lumps, these like nodules all over the trunk, and some of them have, the nodules are quite spaced out and not very pronounced, but oftentimes on these smaller trees they're quite pronounced. And it often has a lot of galls, which are normally created by wasps. They inject a hormone, and it's like a mutation of the tree that provides a home for their young to hatch out of. And there's also a fruit, which is one of the most it's been important since Neolithic times. It's a small dark red fruit with a very thin fruit layer, and then it has a seed inside, and both are edible. And you can dry them out and then grind them up in a powerful blender, or maybe a coffee grinder might be up to the job, or you could mash them up with a pestle and mortar, the more traditional method, and you can make a very nutritional, slightly sweet flour with that, which you could use to add to other flours to bake with, or all the things you could do with the flour. So that's an ink cap, which in the earlier stages, those are edible. I'm not going to eat it. One of the things about these mushrooms, I'm not a mushroom expert, so don't just go on my advice. Find a professional mycologist before you go out gobbling. But you know, you need to study mushrooms far longer even than you need to study plants, because it is very, very easy to misidentify. And I've even misidentified in the past myself, and even top mycologists have misidentified mushrooms. Sometimes you can only narrow it down to a complex or range of species, and so you've got to be very careful with mushrooms, because some of them are edible and some of them are poisonous. I think this is an ink cap. One of the interesting things about ink cap is some people got very sick by drinking alcohol around the time that they've eaten these. Now, spiky leaves, I don't remember the name of this one, but it's a member of the juniper family, and this one's a little bit weedy looking. If it was in a sunnier area, it would have higher levels. If it wasn't shaded out, it would have probably a thicker growth of foliage, and it would be higher in oils. And they're great for starting fires off when the branches go brown. Even when the forest is soaking wet, you can actually start fires with these, because some of them have such a high content of oils when the leaves go brown. And it used to be, some of them, like the eastern red cedar, its cousin, used to be used as smudges in things like peyote ceremonies, when the Caddo started using peyote later on when they were put onto reservation. We don't have any toothache trees here so far, but this is reminiscent. This is another hackberry, but the toothache tree would have spikes on the spines rather than these ridged nodules, and it has a very small berry that it produces in the late summer, and it's called the toothache tree because when you put the berries or the bark or the leaves in your mouth, it causes you to salivate furiously, and it's supposed to be quite beneficial for people with toothache, also for circulatory problems. It's historically been used for. Not this one here, because this is hackberry, which is this is crossvine, and it has these sort of almost like a tiara or something back to these 4 leaves that you see going up the tree. And this was used historically actually as an animal medicine. It used to be used for mules that have been overworked, and when mules have been overworked, that due to heart problems and things, they would just drop dead. And so one of the things that would bring them back from the dead, that would stop them dying of like sort of adrenal burnout and other problems of exhaustion, would be this plant, the crossvine, and they would add it to their feed, and it was supposed to cause a miraculous return to health. And it's also been used for humans as well. Not very widespread use. Really, acorns are it's a nut that the Native Americans were able to gather in a far higher density than other nuts. So although they need significant processing, you need to crack the shells of them and then take the nut meat out of the shell, and then dry it, grind it up into a flour, and then you can soak it. Well, no, you just soak it. This one's been eaten by a weevil. It's got a hole there. But you grind up the nut meat and then you soak it, or one of the quickest ways is a percolation method, which you can do with buckets, or Native Americans would have used it in the clean streams that Europeans hadn't yet polluted. And if you put them in a bag in these streams, in the cold water would leach out, the running water would leach out the tannins and the phytic acid, which act as anti-nutrients. They bind with minerals and would carry them out of the body and cause the very bitter taste. So once you've leached those out, you've got a very high protein, very high quality fat food that can be used as a flour to make flatbreads, or mixed with animal fats and dried meat to make pemmican. Well, this looks here, yeah, you can see the top side. If you look at the top side of these, it's got this sort of like almost like a turkey tail. Let me just break one of these off. There's lots of these. Okay, this appears to have pores, so there's about 3 or 4 looky-likeys to this mushroom. One of them looks more or less the same on top as it does underneath. So there's one that has a pattern on the top and underneath. This one is white, and if you look very closely, or if you had a magnifying glass, you'd see pores. And this is called Trametes versicolor, and it's been used in Chinese medicine for thousands of years, I believe, for a very long time. And it's a very common, it's called what's called a polypore mushroom. And the polypore mushrooms are a bit more difficult to mistaken for the highly poisonous mushrooms, which many have gills. And it's used, you can make a tea from it, or it's extracted in alcohol, and it's supportive of the immune system, and has many other properties which haven't been fully explored yet. But acorns of this size, let me just see if I can find the tree this has come from. I see it. Right up there. You can see the pointed leaves. Right, see the ones that are green with a reddish tint to them? Up there, that's a red oak. And these are very large actually, even for a red oak. They're normally quite big, but these are very impressive size. So really with acorns, bigger is best. Some people argue about the amount of tannins, but it's just tannins aren't really a problem. It just takes longer. If it's got more tannins, it just takes longer to clean them out. Watch out, Robert, because there's poison ivy all around here. It's still green. People think on when they have a what do you call it, like a game reserve, where you have like a deer hunting lease. I don't understand why people have deer hunting leases, why they chop down the oak trees for lumber and then they plant pine trees. Well, the pine trees aren't going to provide much in the way of food for the deer, but these are a very important food source for the deer as well. And so instead of feeding them a substandard food source like deer corn, this is a much better food for them, along with other foods like the crossvine that we found earlier and the poison ivy are going to be much better for them than what they're going to find in a pine forest that's simply going to get logged again. By mushrooms from the beginning, but those are oyster mushrooms. So I think it's Plutorius or something, but these are oyster mushrooms, and after some rains, these are mushrooms that you will see in the forest, and they are edible, but once again you need to be on the course of learning mushrooms, not just as an occasional walk, but this is kind of got to be an obsession, because otherwise it is very easy to misidentify mushrooms. This plant is regarded as a weed, but in the very late summer, this is one of the, in the wild, this is one of the, this and groundsel bush was used by the Cajuns. This one here, one of the daisy fleabanes, is one of the, is an important plant for pollinators. There's not many flowering plants around at the end of the summer when things dry up. It's quite resilient. Raking up and removing the leaves and the branches, and these are you're taking out the inputs to the system, and so these kind of erosional areas, if you've got a lot, you know, the leaves haven't been removed and the branches, then it's going to help mitigate some of the problems of erosion.